He's going to read something. Please tell me it's not nasty, because otherwise YouTube will take me down.
I'll surprise you. I won't surprise you.
Okay.
All right, we're watching the scaffolding that once upheld decency, order, and democracy be destroyed. One is compelled to highlight the parallels to Nazi Germany, but that's one example where a totalitarian fascist government took control and whose power was unchecked, and much has already been told about the horrors that followed. But there are many examples in history of authoritarian regimes ending democratic societies. There's always been ebbs and flows between democracy and social deterioration brought on by coerced masses being led to act against their best interest. By acknowledging how unexceptional this is, we can learn from those who came before us and how they navigated the suffocating dynamics tyranny creates as we build our own story of resilience. Combating the weaponization of the media through social media posts, protesting, and vocal condemnation of the horrors taking place are incredibly important. May we find energy to continue to speak truth to power. However, totalitarianism in the United States of America developed meticulously, and to meet this moment, we must learn how to build a framework that combats fascism at the scale it's created. The landmark work on resisting the allure of fascism at the macro level was Karl Popper's book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, which aimed at preventing the fertilization of political landscapes where fascism grows. Attempting to design utopias isn't pragmatic, and we have ample evidence in its inefficacy. Published in 1945, Karl Popper's objective was not to diagnose totalitarianism. When the government disappears people without due process, whether in 1945 or 2025, you should not need to be told you're under fascist control. Karl Popper warned of how easy it is to fall under the spell of totalitarian regimes and the risks of political dogma, and how to identify the seeds of fascism planted in institutions. Karl Popper's concepts are elegant in their simplicity. Societies are safer when they allow criticism than when they forbid it, and by admitting errors and working in earnest to address them, we can create a far better world than we can with obedience alone. We must establish and protect what Karl Popper coined as the open society, because the opposite, or a closed society, entices with its simplicity, turbocharged through tribalism. An open society comes with a price, what Karl Popper calls the price of being a human being. When open societies are more complicated to live in than closed societies because you carry the burden of being an individual with desires and choices. Contrast that with the seduction of a closed society. When people are exhausted by war, famine, or intense political divide, reductionism is awfully enticing. But in this system, evil, abuse of power, inequality, and suffering are guaranteed. A society made up of free individuals is more difficult to control. That is why fascism regimes focus on the removal of rights using various techniques of coercion and the manipulation of your will to fit the totalitarian system's needs, rather than the system suiting the needs of its people. Timothy Snyder warned us authoritarian leaders favor sweeping decrees because they foreclose correction. That is exactly what Project 2025 is. Tyranny can be simply defined as a refusal of corrections. Many of the most renowned political scientists in human history have asked the wrong question. Who should rule and how should that person rule? But if you want to combat totalitarianism upstream, the better question is how should we design our system so that we can engage in the democratic process without bloodshed and without violence? In 1945, Karl Popper warned us of January 6th. Humans have an inherent desire to be safe, healthy, and at peace. However, for thousands of years, humans learned to identify and support those within their tribe and reject those who were not. This tension reflects a fundamental paradox within the human condition. That is, our collective aspirations for unity and the collective good are constantly challenged by deeply entrenched patterns of tribalism that breed exclusivity. The majority of people want to avoid suffering, but evil people will always exist. Marcus Aurelius said, "To expect bad men not to do wrong is madness, for he who expects this desires an impossibility. But to allow men to behave that way unto others and to expect them not to do thee wrong is irrational. Therefore, I do not aim to condemn evil people, but we should remove their power. A utopia void of wrongdoers is impossible, but societies built on dogma, static values, and ideology will in time condemn them, regardless of how benevolent their architects." Eleanor Ostrom built on these ideas and said open societies facilitate experimentation and learning, trust building and adaptation. Let us recognize that we are going to have conflicts and create a world that allows us to address them and monitor our progress. Timothy Snyder says, "The president is a nationalist, which is not at all the same thing as a patriot. A nationalist encourages us to be our worst and then tells us that we're at our best. A patriot, by contrast, wants the nation to live up to its ideals, which means asking us to be our best selves. A patriot must be concerned with the real world, which is the only place where his country can be loved and sustained. A patriot has universal values, standards by which he judges his nation, always wishing it well, and wishing that it would do better. Resist those who promise greatness through suffering. People's lives should never be a means to an end, and no policy is just if it requires oppression. Legitimate solutions do not rest in promises of perfection, but in procedures that let citizens contribute, deliberate, and disagree without fear. With courts bent to loyalty, media outlets bought or controlled, and freedoms removed one by one, trust will die gradually, until the fascist voice offering order, efficiency, and certainty feels like salvation. True resilience requires institutions that adapt transparently, and equitably. An open society means well-informed citizens engaged in the democratic process, making micro changes. An open society is the safeguard against violence, hatred, and fascism. An open society is never complete. It must be renewed and reinforced over and over as each generation chooses whether to protect the possibility of correction or surrender to the certainty of closure. Marcus Aurelius warns us, recognize the malice, cunning, and hypocrisy that power produces, and the peculiar ruthlessness of those who habitually court it. Resist the seductive reductionism of fascism. Don't allow yourself to become complacent under the intellectual emptiness tyranny provides. Leverage the freedoms you have to be informed and vocal. As Karl Popper says, we must become makers of our fate.
That is awesome. Did you write that?
I did.
Oh my gosh. Can we have your name? Can I show you?
Jimmy.
Jimmy. Just Jimmy? Can I show you, Jimmy?
Yep.
Guys, this is Jimmy who just read that.